Talking like Israetel, let's rank the best and worst back exercises. At the end of the video, we'll give you the 3 best overall back exercises for the lats, the upper back, and the traps. Let's start with the upper back. Or actually, let's start with deadlifts. Where do you rank deadlifts for back growth?
So for deadlifts, for the rest of the back, phenomenal. For lats, negligible. For traps, really good. So if you're looking at it like that, raw stimulus wise, it's A tier. Stimulus to fatigue ratio, it's C tier, because the fatigue of deadlift is just massive. Now, if you take the deadlift and you elevate yourself onto a large platform and you allow almost all of the movement to occur from either hip hinging, but more specifically from spinal flexion and extension, and move the knees very little, then that style of deadlift, which is really a Jefferson curl if you start thinking about it, that starts to get into a B tier exercise for the back, maybe even A tier, because if you do a lot of those and some vertical pulling for your lats, you're going to have a juicy fucking back.
Beautiful. What about the rack pull?
Was it taking every part of the deadlift's worst capacities and multiplying them, and all the best ones and reducing them? So let's say rack pulls are a D tier exercise. Almost the exclusive reason that people do rack pulls is vibes, whether or not they know it. It's just a way to put tons of weight on the bar and move it around. People love that sort of thing. It's just bro culture.
Rack pulls are a no-go. Is there a deadlift variation you recommend for back growth?
Yeah, Jefferson curls, and or just a very deep deficit deadlift where conventional, where you round your back like crazy at the bottom and you like rise up and like uncurl the question mark and then slowly come back down and gently touch the ground. My friend Ethan, who is kind of a world top ranked grappler, he trains at B Team in Austin. Jared and I just taught him how to do that kind of deadlift, and he like walked away after the first set like and we were like, ta-da. He's like, holy crap, there's all sorts of stuff. And he's like a 400-pound deadlifter, and he was using like 180 pounds for sets of 8, and it just cooked him because we put him on a big platform and we're like, don't move your hips a ton, don't move your knees much, just do the back. That way it'll harden you up. And it's also a phenomenal exercise for back resiliency. Like, you're just not going to have back pain if you can do that for 225 for 3x10. 100%. Yeah.
Beautiful. Let's move on to the formal categories, starting with upper back dominant exercises. The dumbbell row, single arm on a bench.
B tier, effective on all upper back grounds. It allows you to really protract and retract the scaps, which is really dope. Amazing rhomboid exercise. It's not A tier, S tier, simply because it just takes so long to do because you have to alternate one arm at a time. But other than that, I think it's great.
There's also the obliques being a bit involved, which is annoying at best. A sort of anti-rotation, and then technique is remarkably easy to fuck as well.
That's a very good point. I did not integrate that into my analysis. If I had to rank the average one-arm row as I've seen people do it, it's a fucking D-tier exercise. But Milo, to that point, most exercises are D-tier how people do them.
Assuming good technique for all
Assuming good technique. But you're right, it does take a little bit of focus to get good technique on that. There's a lot to think about.
For sure. What about the bent over variation where you're doing both arms at once?
I would say that if we're using my proposed nomenclature of traps, lats, and then everything else, I would say that's a comfortable B tier exercise because it does take a lot of spinal erector tension to keep that going, and that's nice and hypertrophic. And then big retraction. Something I don't love is that the top of the movement's so difficult. But we did have a video at some point about modifying bent rows, dumbbell or barbell, for the advanced lifter to where you lower your hips. You really flex at the hips at the bottom to get the biggest stretch you can, and then as you row, you rise up to a 45-degree angle to get an easy click lockout, and then back. That turns it into a nice solid B. Otherwise, it's more like a C.
Hear you. The barbell row.
So on vibes, it's not even S tier. It's just goated. Like, it is.
Yates style.
It exists. Yeah. I think the barbell row for that mid-back spine erector thing is probably an A tier exercise, especially if you do it off a deficit and you do it flexion row style. So you're rounding the back and then arching. And if you do it advanced flexion row style, you round the back, ultra deep stretch touch, and then as you're arching the back, you're also lifting your torso up a little bit, so you get extra reps by being able to give yourself a leverage advantage. And if you're a real baller, you do some length and partials at the end of each set, then it really is an A tier exercise, because there's something about, remember we talked about earlier, like coordinated human movement, or in another video, I guess, we talked about coordinated human movement is designed in certain ways to promote certain muscles. There's something that you get, this whole back activation and whole back pump from bent rowing that's so difficult to get anywhere else, which is like why I did them for years. And one of the reasons I have, like, you know, honestly, a really thick back, because like, fuck man, when you can bent row a lot through a full range of motion, there's just gobs of meat appear on your back. So for that reason, it's great. Again, the leverage problem is unfortunate because at the stretch, it's not a ton, but if you really bend over and then you really come up, you fix at least some of that.
What about the T-bar row? That might solve one of those issues partially.
The T-bar row. Yeah. If you like how the exercise gels with you, I could just never get the foot positioning myself to feel good on it. But the T-bar row does have more force application at the bottom than at the top. I like to load small plates onto it so that I can get a better full contraction. Although in light of recent literature, that's probably backwards advice. I think it's on technical grounds for mid-back, especially including the spinal erectors, I think it's getting to A-tier status.
What about the incline dumbbell row?
It looks like it should be good. But if you come up really high in the incline and dip your head over, it feels better. It does suffer from a nasty force curve problem, where at the bottom it's not doing shit. At the top it's fucking really hard. So I'd say like, and because it's chest supported, it's really good for rhomboids and stuff. But because it's chest supported, it's not great for your erector complex. And so I would say for that reason, it's probably C or B tier or something. There's also, like with dumbbells, there's a stability component, not stability in a traditional sense of side to side, but in a coordinated sense if you're trying to pull both dumbbells at the same time, which requires a lot of neural communication and caps your total overall force. One of the reasons why I like barbell movements so much as opposed to two dumbbells at a time is the integrating factor of having to balance is gone. You just fucking rip it, and it really does pay dividends. So if you gave me some kind of cable and then put me on an incline and then let me do it, I'd say that's better than the dumbbells. I end up just being able to use so little load, and the force curve sucks so much that, see, for me, it's a C tier exercise. You will almost never catch me doing it. I've done it a bunch when I was younger.
What about the chest supported T-bar row? You have one in your gym.
I do. I would say it's pretty damn A tier. It doesn't allow for a lot of dynamism in moving the back. I do get shit for that on the internet. Like, well, if it's chest supported, why are you lifting your chest off? I'm like, oh, wow, you read verbatim exercise names and imply their technique. Amazing.
And you also don't understand what the erectors do.
It's so much there. Like, another one, like when I'm feeling like a piece of shit, I don't mean this is all for jokes, but like, I just want to reply like, you think you're the guy to critique me? You don't think I thought about this? Like, some random asshole says that, and I'm like, oh, fuck. Chest supported row. Oh my God, I was lifting my chest the whole time. What was I doing? So yeah, A tier for sure. There's only one exercise that I think ranks above it in overall back thickness development,
which is
cable flexion row, especially with a good setup. Like, you've just never really had a pump in your mid back like that until you've tried it. It stretches at the bottom. It's dynamic as shit. I have the benefit of having a huge gut, so every single row is partial round for me in the best possible way.
More growth, baby.
Dude, and I've always had like a lot of back thickness as I came up, and I was like, oh, my gut actually helped me on that. So I would say like that's kind of my feeling. But yeah, it's an excellent exercise. I will say the machine you're using does matter, and also say for folks listening, choose different styles of grips to see which ones you like. And I encourage variation in grips. For a few months, do neutral. For a few months, do neutral wide. For a few months, do like medium overhand, and the whole gamut.
Yeah. What about the chest supported machine row?
Chest supported machine row, again, really depends on the machine. So I would say anywhere from C tier, where like the machine just sucks and the force curve is awful because it's easy at the bottom, hard at the top. If it limits your range of motion, which you're a tall king, you might encounter that in real machines. I don't, but My arms actually are relatively normal length. I just have really short legs. So I have encountered machines where I've stopped and I'm like, who built this? I'm 5'6". Who's this designed for? Impressive. People, anyone over, even below average male height, just categorically just won't use the machine. There's a pull down machine like that. I'm not going to say who makes it because these are
wild.
Real people with real jobs. But
people who make pull down machines that are like insufficient for anyone to get a stretch, straight to hell.
Yep. I was using one where it was like, for me, if I grabbed the lower handles, I couldn't stretch. If I grabbed the upper handles, the movement would end right here. And I was just like, what is this? What's going on? So a good machine like the Matrix row, I mean, I would say is up there in the A tier for me because it really checks all the boxes. Huge range of motion, mega emphasis on stretch, really comfortable pad, an ability. Some pads and machine setups just really let you cave over at the bottom and really arch up at the top because there's, based on the machine design, if you arch at the top of some of them, it feels really awkward, but some of them you arch at the top, everything just clicks, and then you re-engage and slowly drive. Oh, then we're talking some serious good stuff.
Beautiful. A couple of row variations to round it out that aren't loaded on the spine necessarily. First, the inverted row.
I want to believe more in the inverted row than I'm led to believe in it. A lot of times it actually turns into more of like a rear delt and upper trap exercise for me and mid trap. So say for mid traps and rhomboids, the inverted row is actually quite good. Your feet get slippery and they start sliding away from you. You got to set it up more. That costs the exercise a little bit. So I'd say in many cases it's a solid B tier. On like just diagrammatical biomechanics, I would say it's an A tier, S tier exercise, but in real life it always turns out like, it's not as stable and loadable as I want. The other problem there is like you have to keep a decent amount of hip and leg rigidity for it to work well. You get tired. Like if an exercise allows you to just focus on the target muscle and nothing else,
that's good.
It's awesome.
Yep.
And now like I'm just thinking about like pushing my hips through. I'm not even thinking about pulling anymore. So then it's kind of like that's why it gets kind of more of a B tier than an A or S tier.
And if nothing else, I think the way it's set up, if you have your feet sort of set flat on the ground, you can maximize resistance to the stretch, and then it decreases as you grow up effectively. However, that also makes the movement extremely easy.
Yes.
And loading it is like the push-up, a bitch.
Confusing at best.
Yes. Cool. Final one, seal rows.
Here's an interesting thing, Milo. I used to love camber bar rows, and I still like them plenty. And I never could figure out why I hated seal rows until your summary of literature came out about the importance of the stretch. And then I realized like, oh yeah, seal rows are the worst possible leveraged back exercise. Another problem I have with seal rows, and maybe it's just because of my build, but when I try to come up nice and high, my center of gravity shifts and my feet end up doing this, and I'm like unstable.
That's why it's called the seal row, because you look like a seal when you're
seriously
flailing around.
Like that's the part they named it after, not that it was like that. And so I'm like, can I put my feet somewhere like to really brace? And so for that reason, seal rows aren't great. I will say that if you, and this is not an ideal exercise, but if you are able to get seal rows, I would say choose a weight that's very light. And then instead of rowing to your chest, which really I just don't know what that does, try to row to your hips. And at least you get some decent lat activation and eccentric control, something. But for me, it's a C tier exercise and really in many cases D tier, because it's just, you only have to do a few sets and have a decent mind-muscle connection to know, like, oh, this sucks. You know? Yeah.
You hate seal rows. I like them a bit more than you on two counts. One, it is a lengthened partial by design. Like, forget touching your chest. You end even earlier because the bench gets in the way.
I usually have seal row setups that have a cambered bar.
Oh, I see. You can do them without them as well if you wanted to.
Without them's probably better.
Yeah. And then the second thing is they do lend themselves quite well to extension of the spine. Like, naturally when you row to get it kind of all the way,
I can't do that.
You'll tend to extend your
spine. Really? I can't, because that's the part that throws me off. As soon as I start extending, I start wobbling. Damn. I start extending, and then my feet go like this. No joke.
Trippy.
But I'm built like different than most people. So.
Like Arthur in the Oompa Loompas or whatever.
Who the fuck was Arthur?
I don't even know, bro. I'm just making shit up.
My man.
All right, upper traps. We have 4 exercises.
Okay.
Let's start with the barbell shrug.
B tier, maybe A tier. I would say that it's important to have a rapid concentric, accelerated concentric to get the weight as high as you can, and then lock it in and slowly milk that eccentric. Really deep stretch, 2-second hold, and then again. That's an exercise in which I actually like an Olympic weightlifting version of it better than the conventional, which you use some hip power to do the concentric and then milk the eccentric, or you do straight set and then superset with milked kind of assisted reps. So I would say A tier, B tier, depending on how execution works. Again, per your earlier clarification, how most people do them, D tier, because it's 18 plates on a side with dick for range of motion. That becomes confusing as to what it is you're actually doing there.
Yeah, with barbell shrugs, the thing I struggle with is how many plates you have to load typically. And most people tend to pause in the bottom and top position, which then heavily limits how much of a weighted stretch they're able to get.
Totally. My problem is even more extensive than that. It's when I pause at the top, I feel my muscles way more. But if I didn't pause at the top, I could accentuate the lengthened position better. So it's kind of like, I just kind of wish it was a different exercise. You know, I wish it had the adjustable force curve. If you gave me a shrug machine where it was ultra heavy down here and then light up here, goated instantly.
Prime rows, like the prime chest supported machine row, kind of makes me feel like that.
Yeah. If you lean back on it and try to do that, makes sense.
Dumbbell shrugs, standing.
Usually better than barbell, because you can get a bigger range of motion, huge stretch. You're not limited by, like, both arms can really sink in super low. Quite good. Again, very easy setup. The barbell, one does not merely barbell shrug. One does not simply do that. Get the bar in there. People like, how many sets do you have? There's like, the gym culture thing where like, why are you taking up the rack? Like, this is for people doing real power sport. You're like, sorry.
Not in commercial gyms.
Right, you're right.
Mostly.
But then, like, the 2 or 3 people you're cool with that actually try to powerlift in the commercial gym, it's even worse. Now you're, like, in the way of the only 2 people you respect at that gym. And so, yeah, like, dumbbells are just awesome. Take them out of the rack, put them on a bench, boom, 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 put them back on the bench. Great for Myo reps and all that stuff. So, A tier, S tier trap exercise.
Seated dumbbell shrugs. We just sit down on a bench and do the same thing.
Like, for some reason, perceptively, I don't feel them as much and like them as much, but similar rank to standing, and probably a little better because it's not as much axial fatigue and systemic fatigue. So, yeah, excellent exercise, A tier, S tier.
And now for your favorite, farmer's walks.
Yeah, D tier, instantly. On raw stimulus magnitude, excellent. A tier, probably. A tier, not S tier, only because they have a mostly static component, isometric component. I really do think that it's probably true that having a concentric and eccentric phase is better than just isometric, though isometrics are quite effective in many cases.
Did Dr. Pack speak to you about the isometric literature?
No.
There's like 2 studies only.
It's just very few, man.
There's 2 studies looking at isometrics versus dynamic contractions on muscle growth, and their findings are inconclusive at best. So now we're actually conducting the first study, well, one of the first, on isometrics versus dynamic contractions, specifically doing the isometrics at the longest possible muscle length.
Oh, dope.
And trying to see, hey, is there something there?
Yeah.
Is it worse? Is it fine? Is it better? Who knows?
Yeah.
Because that's one assumption that I've also made in the past. It's like, isometric is definitely worse than dynamic.
Yeah.
I'm curious.
Farmer's walks are a little dynamic because you start the farmer's walk at a certain...
Wobbling around as well.
Wobbling, definitely. And also you start contracted a little bit to get stability and make sure your arms aren't out of their sockets. But almost everyone by the end is sagging, which is actually good because it actually takes you through a very slow eccentric during that time. The passive component is massive. The problem is that, like, you can lift so much weight and now you're actually dynamically moving with so much weight.
Just stand.
Like, the systemic fatigue... say that again?
Just stand instead if you want.
Just stand, and then, like... Why are you lifting 200 pounds in each hand? Just to get the 80s and go through a more full range of motion with dumbbells and you're good to go. So the farmer's carry, because of that dynamic component, massive axial fatigue. I mean, is the axial fatigue exercise. Maybe no worse one except for like the yoke or something like that. And then the dynamism introduces much more fatigue. So it's like a systemic fatigue killer. It's one of those things where, like, bad takes 101 where you like post trap training and someone's like, just do farmer's carries. Like, oh, you fucking genius. Holy shit. How hardcore are you? Like, how big is your lifted truck, you fucking idiot? 100%.
See you later,
like,
nerd.
Yeah, you're not in the fucking WSM Super Series. Shut up. You're some guy at the gym everyone hates because you yell too much. All jokes, though. Yeah, so D tier exercise. On raw stimulus magnitude, A tier. On stimulus to fatigue ratio, as bad as it gets. Like, it's just a great way to like feel like you got hit by a truck and someone's like, what's the upside? You're like, I think my traps grew a little bit. You're like, whoa, holy shit. Amazing.
All right, let's move on to lats, final muscle. Let's start with the cable pullover.
A tier, S tier. Because lat prayer, same thing, right? Straight arm lat pull down, that whole business. Lots of variation. You can do rope, you can do neutral handle, you can do overhand, underhand, whatever. If you step out of the machine a little bit and lean all the way down to parallel, you can just get the best force curve alignment possible. Maximum tension at the stretch, much less, arguably zero at the end. It's selectorized. I mean, warming up is easy. It's one of my favorite lat-specific exercises. So A tier, S tier.
Beautiful. And by comparison, the dumbbell or barbell pullover?
I would say equivalent. They get negative points for setup, positive points for not being limited by any kind of cable friction, and so just awesome. And I just don't do them because I have hideous shoulder mobility. So I wish I could do them. Maybe in the future I'll figure that mobility shit out. It's just not a big priority for me. Then maybe I'll do them. But like anytime I see someone doing a properly executed easy bar pullover or dumbbell pullover, I'm like, ooh, just beautiful. And the version you showed on our channel where you don't come all the way up, but you stay in that lengthened position is awesome. I would say a cool modifier to that is do as many of those as you can. Lock out fully, 5 breaths, and then go again and do as many. I mean, you're just going to cook yourself. It's going to be amazing.
What about resistance profile differences between cable pullover and dumbbell pullover, and also like degrees of freedom? Like I find with cable pullovers, typically my hips kind of move around. I tend to it's difficult to get in a stretch sometimes because you have to almost like manually put your arms up enough.
Yeah.
You know?
I have another problem, which is like my upper body is quite large and my legs aren't very long. And so that means that if I use sufficient weight on the dumbbell pullover, I just fall backwards. No joke. So for me, it's actually like I need to like weave my feet under them. Yeah. So
that is a downside.
But yeah. But on stability concerns, generally, the free weight version on a bench is really difficult to beat.
Yeah. So A tier, you'd say?
S tier.
S tier. Machine pullovers.
On paper, S tier. In reality, B tier. Good. Jared and I went to train at a gym in San Diego once, and we were like so excited to use the pullover. Neither one of us fit into it. And like, we're big. We're not that big.
Good problem to
like,
have.
I guess we are that big, right? Like, I'm the fucking delusional. Like, I'm 235 at 5'6", and I'm like, I'm not that big. People are like, what are you, nuts? Like, yeah, compared to some IFB pros, maybe not. There you go. There's body dysmorphia for you. But and a lot of times, like, the angle isn't quite right. There's like a pushing plate for your elbows, but then there's something to grab. Sometimes neither one of them feels ideal. So it's kind of like a lot of times they made the machine so complex that they complicated their way out of an ideal fit. So on average, I would say B tier. If you get a great machine, A tier, S tier. If you get a shit machine, like is useless, D tier, or does it not get ranked?
D tier.
Yeah, D tier. So
cool. Overhand lat pull downs.
Cable.
Yeah, just cable overhand. Actually, let's go overhand, neutral, and underhand in one, just because they are pretty similar. I just want to see how you rank them.
Overhand and underhand, I would say, are C tier. Neutral is B tier. Force profile is just dog shit. Look, it's a fine meat and potatoes exercise. America built its lats on those exercises.
It ain't much.
It ain't much, but it'll work. Underhand is tough. Most people don't have the mobility to comfortably do underhand on a straight bar. Maybe not most. Many people don't, or it just feels weird. You'd also because you're like this, it limits how much stretch you can generate. The angle is good. The stretch isn't great. Neutral is awesome. The problem with neutral is if you're using like Versa grips or some kind of grip assist, which you have to make the exercise functional, is like if you go a little this way or that way on the neutral, the bar starts rotating, and then you're just like, damn it, can't it just work? So like not amazing. You can optimize the exercise a little bit to get it going in that regard. I actually do an intentional lean back and lean forward to get a little bit more of the tension where it's supposed to be. But yeah, B tier at best.
Makes sense to me. So B tier neutral, C tier overhand, underhand.
Yeah.
What about the pull up and the chin up? So pull up, overhand. chin-up, underhand?
I would say roughly equivalent, especially if you have a chin-up station where they have an angle on it. And I would say that generally speaking, it is A tier or S tier for me when I do conventional pull-ups of any kind. So one of the only exercises that dependably gets my lats sore every single time. I attribute that to the massive eccentric control that I impose during that movement. And there's no eccentric to concentric friction stuff, so it's really smooth. Another thing is, while it is technically true that the movement is more difficult at the top than the bottom in some respect, in a real pull-up, as soon as you get your chin to roughly bar height, going above is actually easier.
Easy, yeah.
And what you can do if you go above is lock in and then let the movement pull you. And your tension, as physics would demonstrate, biomechanics would demonstrate, is quite low on the bottom, but your lats are so stretched out and so poorly aligned, they actually have to be recruited a massive amount to do some work. It's kind of a good news, bad news thing. So for me, pull-ups typically are just like top-down lat destruction. And that's based on a lot of personal experience. And so I would say, like, I'm comfortable saying they're an A tier exercise.
Yeah.
For me, they're S tier. For others, they could be a B tier. I've never trained with anyone that properly done pull-ups didn't blow their shit up. No one. People say they don't like them, and you watch them do pull-ups, and you're like,
That's why.
I can tell you why you don't like this. So.
Now for a few other variations. First, assisted pull-ups and also band-assisted pull-ups. So machine-assisted pull-ups.
Yeah, band-assisted pull-ups get a C tier from me. The force curves backwards, which sucks. The thing is that in many cases, people don't have an assisted pull-up, and the band-assisted is
buy it.
just like, say what?
Just buy it.
I mean, even better advice is just have your butlers buy it.
Yeah.
You know, why would you go
Outsource
on
it.
the,
Why
I don't
would
even know
you
how
do
to
it your
buy
hands?
stuff. My God, you
Wear
want me
gloves.
to go on a computer? Things they use in offices? I'm not a worker.
Peasant stuff.
My God. People are like, hey, you buy stuff on Amazon? I'm like, what's Amazon? Is that Jeff's company?
Oh, yeah. You
I
just
know.
call him.
My man. I mean, Jeff, can I get a mouse shipped to the house? He's like, sure. He just goes on Amazon
Live
on his
mouse.
own account.
For
Yes.
the dog.
I
Only
actually
the best.
use a mouse that I click on it's a physical real mouse. I click on his head and there's neural linked in to use the mouse itself. He die every few days. They die. You know, feed
Just
them or
replace it.
anything like that. They're a dime a dozen, quite literally. I don't know how much they cost. Again, money's not an object to me. When you're a trillionaire,
Concept.
things change. I don't even think about it much, Milo, to be honest. It's not even a concept. When people talk about, like, oh, you have a lot of money. I'm like, a lot of what? I just, like, have everything I need
Money isn't real,
all the time.
as Andrew Tate once said.
Money isn't real. None of this is real. Free. Free money. Lose it all.
Is that really true?
Yeah, he said, this isn't real, and pointing at money.
I guess he meant, like, it's a symbolic representation
Yes.
of wealth. He has a way
A great
with words.
philosopher.
Yes.
Great thinker, truly.
Yes, yes. And such an ethical man. Ethics, not by Plato, but by
Only allegedly
by
criminal.
Andrew Tate. Allegedly. Yeah, well, the Bulgarian government has a lot to say about that, or Romanian, or whatever the hell he is in jail for selling sex workers. Band assisted, yeah, not great. C tier. Assisted pull-ups, on average, B tier. The best ones are S tier. Ones that get you a real baller, eccentric application, big range of motion, huge stretch. I still haven't put my finger on what it is, but properly executed assisted pull-ups are not a one-to-one replacement for lat pull-downs. They're different. Some people like them worse, some like them better. Most people like them better. To me, I think it's like something where, like, riding out the eccentric just feels like it's more difficult and more engaging on an assisted pull-up than on a lat pull-down.
It could just be friction. I feel like fewer people use the assisted machine, and so maybe the cables on average are less worn out.
Maybe. I would believe that.
I don't know.
It's a machine that people just look at and they're like, nah.
Nah, whatever. Yeah. May as well do pull-downs.
Yeah.
Everyone does pull-downs. All right, final exercise before we close out the video. The plate-loaded lat pull-down.
B tier. It's annoying to set up, but for me, the momentum effects of the raw weight allow me to pull really hard in and then really have to engage to slow it down. To me, plate-loaded lat pull-downs feel more like assisted pull-ups than anything else.
sure.
I actually love the machine, and anyone listening, all you got to do is make a machine in which the cable attaches to the plate situation, And at the bottom of the machine, the cable does this, and when you pull it, it does that. You put the weights on here, and you may have literally designed an instant S-tier exercise. If you have a machine that you want me to promote on our 3 million subscriber channel, please, I'll pay real money for it even. Well, my butlers will.
Real money.
There's no such thing. Tate at all.
Yep. All right. Best exercise for lats, best exercise for upper back and erectors, whatever, and upper traps. What are your top 3?
For me personally, integrating what I know and experienced and just from my own personal situation.
Not you, like Israetel, the average person.
The average person.
The average viewer.
Pull-ups, 4 lats.
Overhand?
It doesn't matter. I would say just doesn't. All great variants. Cool. Get good at really well eccentrically controlled deep pull-ups. Start loading them with weight. If you can do sets of 10 with a 25-pound hanging, you will have fucking lats. Like, it's just one of those things. For the rest of the back, minus traps, I would say cable flexion rows are real tough to beat on a good cable machine. And then for traps, you never asked me about Y raises. I think those are quite good, quite nice.
No, hit me.
But actually for traps, I will say barbell high pull upright rows with a slow eccentric blow my traps up like nothing. It is a huge full trap move. Remember, traps don't just elevate the scaps, for which they aren't even the prime mover, but they do tilt the scaps in, and that is a huge part of the upright row. And so for me, I actually don't get a better trap stimulus than with like barbell or cable upright rows. Actually, lying cable upright row is a great exercise. No axial fatigue. And incredibly easy to do Myra matches and stuff. Though. Very goofy looking. People
S-tier
are like,
for goofy looking.
Yes. D tier for looking cool. But yeah, people look at you doing that and they're like, what the hell? But when you're jacked enough, they don't give a shit because people are like, that must be working. And then you see other people try it later.
Mike, if these 3 exercises get me to look like you and you're back, I'll fucking do it.
My man.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Till next time.